As we go through this video, I'm first going to show you how to multiply, divide, add and subtract fractions. I'm then going to move on to show you how to find a fraction of an amount and also how to write a number as a fraction of another. The easiest function to perform when looking at fractions is multiplying. If I want to multiply 4/5 by a half, I'm simply going to multiply the numerators together and multiply the denominators together. 4 times 1 is 4, 5 times 2 is 10. 4/5 times a half is 4/10. To divide fractions, I need to turn it into a multiplication sum, and I do this using the keep, change, flip method. Keep refers to my first fraction. I'm going to keep that exactly as it is. Change refers to the symbol, and I'm going to change that from a division sum to a multiplication sum. Flip refers to my final fraction. I'm going to flip the numbers up the other way. So I have 2 on the top and 1 on the bottom. And there I now have a multiplication sum, which I can deal with in the same way I dealt with the others. 3 times 2 as my numerators and 4 times 1 as my denominators. 3 times 2 is 6. 4 times 1 is 4. To add or subtract fractions, you always need a common denominator. And here you can see if I wanted to add 2/5 to 3/7, as it stands at the moment, I couldn't do that. I have got to make equivalent fractions with a common denominator in order to be able to add them. I'm going to show you a method that, if you use it, it will work every single time to create that common denominator. To help you remember the method, it's called the butterfly method. And we call it the butterfly method because of the shape it creates on the paper as we're marking off our process one stage at a time. The first stage is to write equivalent fractions with the common denominator by multiplying the 2 denominators we have already. 5 times 7 is 35. So that is the denominator of both our new equivalent fractions. The numerator to the first one is achieved when I multiply top left and bottom right. So 2 times 7 is 14. The numerator to the second one is achieved when I go the other way, bottom left to top right. 3 times 5 is 15. They're my equivalent fractions, but with my new common denominator. And this is my butterfly format, because there's my butterfly. Now all that's left for me to do is, counting in 35ths, add both the top numbers. So 14 plus 15 is 29. I'm now going to use the same butterfly method to create 2 equivalent fractions before I subtract them. Multiplying the 2 denominators, I get a common denominator of 15. Multiplying these 2 numbers, my first numerator is 12, and these 2 numbers, my second numerator is 5. I remember that this is a subtraction sum, so I'm still counting in 15ths. My denominator doesn't change. This time it's 12, take away 5, which leaves me with 7. We're going to write one amount as a fraction of another? Here's a typical way you could be asked that question. It says, during March it rained for 12 days. For what fraction of the month did it rain? So the first thing we need to do is to identify how many days there are in total in the month of March. That's 31. Of that 31 days, 12 of them were rainy. So the fraction of rainy days is going to be 12 out of 31. In question B, we're asked to do two things. We have two separate amounts for which we need to create a fraction. We're then being asked to compare which is the greater or smaller fraction. Let's look at the first part. In two tests, Isabel gets 13 out of 20, a fraction which I can write like so, and 16 out of 25. Now, to compare these fractions, they need to have a common denominator. And I can see from both of them that the best common denominator would be out of 100. So as we did when we were working out equivalent fractions, I need to work out my multiplier. What do I times 20 by to make 100? That's 5. If you're not sure, the sum you need to do is 100 divided by 20. If my multiplier on the bottom is 5, that's what I need to do on the top. 5 times 13 is 65. So proportionally, the fraction that Isabel got for her first test was 65 out of 100. I'm going to go through the same process with the second fraction, and I'm looking for my multiplier by 25 this time. Just in case you're unsure, that's 100 divided by 25. That's 4. So my multiplier is 4. I do the same to the top. This time 4 times 16 gives me 64. I can now compare the size of these fractions because they have a common denominator, and I can see that this one is greater. Therefore, Isabel did better in her first test. Now to finding a fraction of an amount. As you can see here, and I'm sure you know already, 3/10 means we take one whole one, my rectangular shape, we cut it into 10 pieces, and then we select 3 of those pieces. Mathematically, cutting something into a number of pieces is a division function, and then selecting a number of pieces is a multiplication function. So that's how I deal with my fraction. I divide by the denominator, then I multiply by the numerator. So to find 3/10 of 40, I first of all take my whole one and divide by 10, meaning each piece has a value of 4. I then take my value of 4 and multiply it by my numerator of 3, which means I want 3 of those pieces. 3 lots of 4 is 12. I can focus on doing that purely numerically. I don't have to draw my shape. If I wanted to find 2/5 of 30, I would start with 30 and divide by 5, giving a value to each piece of 6. I'd then take my 6 and multiply it by 2, meaning that 2/5 of 30 is 12.